There are three words neuroscientists accidentally discovered while studying courtroom power dynamics. These words can make anyone instantly perceive you as higher status. Once you understand the cognitive bias they exploit, you'll feel like you're cheating at human interaction. I'm going to reveal exactly what they are and why they work. But first you need to understand the hidden psychology that makes them so devastatingly effective. Here's what researchers found when they analyzed thousands of hours of courtroom footage. They weren't looking for persuasion techniques or power language. They were studying stress responses in witnesses. But they noticed something strange. Certain lawyers, even when they were losing cases, maintained an inexplicable level of respect from everyone in the room. Judges leaned forward when they spoke. Opposing counsel became oddly deferential. Witnesses softened their tone. And it all came down to three specific words these lawyers used at critical moments. But before I tell you what those words are, you need to understand why they work. Because if you just use them without understanding the mechanism, they'll backfire spectacularly. There's a cognitive bias hardwired into your brain called the authority inference loop. Your brain is constantly scanning for social hierarchy signals. It's asking, who do I need to respect here? Who has power? And here's the fascinating part. Your brain doesn't determine authority based on actual credentials or accomplishments. It determines authority based on behavioral cues that suggest someone already has authority. It's circular logic, but it's how human social structures have worked for hundreds of thousands of years. If someone acts like they're already respected, your brain assumes there must be a good reason and automatically grants them respect. It's a shortcut that saved our ancestors' cognitive energy. They didn't have time to evaluate everyone's competence from scratch. They just watched for the signals that others were already treating someone as high status. Now here's where it gets interesting. The three words that trigger this authority inference loop are not what you'd expect. They're not aggressive. They're not commanding. In fact, they seem almost passive at first glance. The three words are, I've noticed that. I know what you're thinking. That sounds completely underwhelming. But stay with me, because the psychology behind why this works is absolutely fascinating. Once you understand it, you'll see these three words everywhere powerful people speak. When you say, I've noticed that before making an observation, you're doing something neurologically profound, you're positioning yourself as the observer rather than the participant. You're placing yourself outside the situation, analyzing it from a higher vantage point. And here's the key. Observers have higher status than participants. Coaches have higher status than players. Directors have higher status than actors. Judges have higher status than defendants. When you linguistically position yourself as the observer, everyone's brain automatically slots you into that higher status position. Let me give you a real example. Imagine you're in a meeting and two colleagues are arguing about a project deadline. Most people would jump in with their opinion. They'd say something like, I think we should extend the deadline, or I disagree with that approach. But watch what happens when you say, I've noticed that we tend to underestimate setup time on these projects. Suddenly you're not part of the argument. You're above it. You're the person who sees patterns. You're the person with perspective. And everyone in that room will unconsciously perceive you as having more authority. Here's another scenario. You're on a date and it's going well, but there's some tension you can't quite identify. Instead of asking what's wrong or trying to fix it, you say, I've noticed that we both seem a little nervous, and honestly, I think that's a good sign. Look at what just happened. You acknowledged the tension, but you did it from a position of observational authority. You named the thing everyone was feeling, but couldn't articulate. That's a power move disguised as vulnerability. The reason this works so well is because of something psychologists call meta-awareness. When you demonstrate that you're aware of the dynamics happening in a situation, you signal that you're operating at a higher cognitive level. You're not in the maze. You're looking at the maze from above, and the person who can see the whole maze is always perceived as more intelligent and more authoritative. But here's the critical part most people miss. These three words only work if you're actually making a genuine observation. If you fake it, if you say, I've noticed that just to sound smart without actually having noticed anything meaningful, people will smell it immediately. The authority inference loop only activates when your observation demonstrates real awareness. You can't trick your way into respect. You have to earn it by actually paying attention. So here's how you practice this. For the next 3 days, just observe. Don't try to use a phrase yet. Just watch human behavior like you're a documentary filmmaker. Here are some things to notice. Notice patterns in how your coworkers communicate. Notice what makes your partner tense or relaxed. Notice what triggers defensive reactions in people. Build your actual observational muscle, because the words I've noticed that are just the delivery mechanism. The real power comes from having something worth noticing. Now let's talk about the second layer of why this works. When you say I've noticed that, you're also creating what neuroscientists call a certainty anchor. Your brain craves certainty. Uncertainty creates stress. When someone makes a definitive observation about a confusing situation, they're offering your brain something it desperately wants. A framework for understanding what's happening. And we automatically grant authority to people who reduce our uncertainty. Think about the last time you were in a confusing social situation. Maybe a tense family dinner, or an awkward work event. The person who could name what was happening, who could say, I've noticed that everyone's avoiding talking about the obvious thing, that person immediately became the most powerful voice in the room. Not because they were loud or aggressive, but because they offered certainty in a sea of confusion. Here's the thing, though. You can't overuse this. If you're constantly saying, I've noticed that about everything, you'll come across as condescending and analytical. The power comes from strategic deployment. Use it when there's actual tension or confusion that needs naming. Use it when you've observed a genuine pattern that others haven't articulated. Use it sparingly and it's devastating. Use it constantly and it's annoying. Let me give you one more example that ties this all together. Imagine you're trying to give feedback to someone who's defensive. Most people would say you need to be more open to criticism or you're being too sensitive. Those approaches trigger defensiveness. But watch what happens when you say, I've noticed that when I give you feedback, you tend to explain rather than just listening. And I'm wondering if that's because you think I'm attacking you rather than trying to help. You've just done something remarkable. You've observed their pattern, you've demonstrated awareness of the dynamic, and you've opened space for them to self-reflect without making them wrong. That's the kind of communication that makes people think, wow, this person really gets it. So here's your framework. Here are the steps. Build observational awareness by looking for patterns in human behavior that others miss. When you spot something meaningful, especially in moments of tension or confusion, use those 3 words to name what you're seeing. Position yourself as the observer and offer the certainty anchor. Watch how people's perception of you completely transforms. The lawyers who inspired this research weren't more aggressive than their colleagues. They weren't louder or more credentialed. They just consistently demonstrated that they were operating at a higher level of awareness. They saw what others missed, and they had the courage to name it. That's what these 3 words represent. Not a manipulation trick, but a genuine elevation of your observational capacity. Start practicing this today. Watch people. Notice patterns. And when the moment is right, offer your observation using this frame. You'll be shocked at how quickly people start treating you differently. And if this clicked for you, do me a favor and subscribe, because we're just getting started on the hidden psychology of human influence.